Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. We haven't seen each other for a minute, but I am back in the chair tonight because it's St. Patrick's Day. And joining me tonight is the Honorable Penny Gross, who for 28 years represented the Mason District on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. She retired in January of 2024, and she is joining us today to reflect a little bit about the nature of government, specifically local government. Thank you so much for joining me, Penny.
It's been a pleasure to get reacquainted with you. I've missed you, Catherine. I really have. I miss not being in the thick of things.
Well, we miss you too, because we both served on the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Right. Me for 2 years and you for 28, and on the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, yes, where you really were very instrumental. They renamed the conference room at NVRC the Penelope A. Gross Conference Room. That is the amount of respect NVRC had for your tenure.
Thank you.
But you have actually been in government for 60 years. So people might be going, wow, 28 years is a long time to serve in elected office, but it's actually 60 years. So you came right out of the University of Oregon and went right to Washington.
That's right. That's right.
So you served under several different elected leaders there.
I did. I always like to say that I started at the top and I worked my way down, because I came from Oregon, as you mentioned. I'm probably the only person I know who actually used her political science degree from the minute she got it walking across the stage. I came to Washington. I got a job with my home state senator, Senator Wayne Morse. Now, this was during the run up to the Vietnam War, and he was a major anti-war senator. And so I worked for him for 3.5 years until he got defeated. And then I went to work for Senator Frank Church of Idaho, and I was with him for 12 years on the Hill, and then I went downtown with him for 3 years until he died. And then I continued working with his wife, who was very well known politically. Then went back onto the Hill with Mike Kopetsky of Oregon. And when Mike told me he wasn't going to run again after only 2 terms, I thought, I need to find something to do. I had worked for all these wonderful elected officials for so long. Now it was time for me to put my name on the ballot. So I did.
But it's so interesting, because a lot of people go from, like Jerry Connolly, went from being a supervisor to the chair to being congressman.
Yes.
You did it in reverse, in that you came from the Senate to all the way down the hill into the Mason District. So that's kind of a bit of a not the usual.
It's not the usual trajectory, and I always, when I was working for senators from the Pacific Northwest, I was always so thankful that we were so far away, because you wouldn't run into your constituents in the grocery store or the dental office or anything. They'd have to come a long way, and of course when I started, it was a long-distance phone call. You had to fly in. That we didn't have any of these fancy devices we have today. It was all...
People sent you a letter, and they put a stamp on it. It took a while to get there, and your response took a while to get back.
That's exactly right. And so, then becoming a local elected official, suddenly I was in the midst of my constituents all the time, 24/7, never got away from it. And that's fine. I discovered that it's something I really, really loved. I already knew constituent service. It's the same, it doesn't matter which level of government you are, it's the issues that may be different. As I always like to tell my constituents, I can help you with garbage and streetlights and the county budget, but I don't declare war, and I can't help you with your Social Security. So constituents want somebody to listen to them. They need a shoulder, sometimes to cry on. Sometimes they need somebody to, rabble-rouse, but they really just want somebody to listen to them. And that's what you do as an elected official. If you're a good elected official, you're going to listen to your constituents.
Well, clearly they kept re-electing you.
Yes, they did.
But we were talking, in 28 years, a lot happens. So you were elected in 1995, so your term began in 1996. So we had Y2K. But everybody stayed up till midnight. I did too. Everybody stayed up till midnight. Then we had the tragedy of 9/11.
Yes.
Then we had the mortgage crisis, which really imploded the housing industry and impacted the economy for such a long time. Then we had COVID. So you were there during COVID. Just all of these things were, in their time, unprecedented.
And at the same time, we were welcoming more and more diverse residents to our community, which also changed the approach sometimes to how people would react, because we were enjoying different cultures, different foods, different ways of living, and so that expands everything that you do, because your population is growing, but it isn't growing the way it traditionally did years ago. So that's that other piece that makes our tapestry so rich.
And Mason District is one of the most diverse districts in the entire county, which I appreciate, because in Fairfax City we are also very diverse, and George Mason University is probably the most diverse university in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We welcome everyone here, people from all over the world. Like over 100 languages are spoken in any one building, event, school, and especially elementary schools, which is kind of a struggle as far as funding education in Fairfax County. And I know that that's the biggest part of the budget, is trying to come up, but education matters, and it gets more expensive every year to fund education.
It does, with more and more needs in the schools. We have a greater disparity of haves and have-nots that we didn't used to deal with. I've always looked at the funding of education, because it is such an important part of our budget. You know, when our 3 children were growing up and going to Fairfax County schools, we were paying, I think, like $2,500 a year in real estate taxes. So I know that somebody else was paying for my children's education, and because we couldn't have educated our children on that amount. And now the numbers are much greater, but I'm paying for somebody else's child to go to school, and that's perfectly all right. I wish we could get more people to understand we're in this together, and so it's going to benefit all of our children. But the growth of the Fairfax County Public Schools has really been tremendous. It's something to be very proud of, and we've been able to navigate through all these various challenges that almost every family that has children in school has some sort of a challenge, and we're able to deal with it because we're able to fund at least as much as we can. We see what the priorities are. Public education is a priority for Fairfax County.
Oh, it is, and we have an excellent school system, but it's also, I think, like the 10th largest in the nation.
It's always nice to see it up there at the top. It really is.
But moving that many students around, I remember at one point, I think I heard that the Fairfax County school bus system had more buses than Greyhound.
I wouldn't be at all surprised.
I think I did hear that at some point.
I think we had 1,500 buses at one point.
Right, and so that's transporting that many kids all at one time, simultaneously, every single day, 5 days a week. It's massive. It's massive, and people kind of see the experience of educating children being their children, their neighborhood, their bus stop.
Yeah.
But it's enormous in the county.
When my kids were ready to go to kindergarten, it was like they could hardly wait to get on the bus, and I was terrified because I was sending these little children onto this great big bus. But they loved it. It was a socializing experience for them too.
In special education, and I have not followed, it just seems like we are better at diagnosing things from dyslexia to autism, and also mainstreaming students with disabilities into the classroom instead of separating them out.
And one of the beautiful things I think about, I know when my daughters were at Holmes Middle School, Holmes had a program for disabled children. So they were in the hallways all the time. All the kids who were able-bodied could see the kids who were in wheelchairs and needed assistance and so forth. And I think it gave them a greater appreciation for what they normally would have been protected from. And I think when I look back on my education, I know that there was a boy in our high school class who must have been either dyslexic or on the autism spectrum. It wasn't. We just thought he was dumb, and that was so sad. I think back now, we just were not diagnosing these situations. I don't think that we have more of it now. I think we are able, as you said, to diagnose it and to understand it a bit more, and to be willing to help people who have different diagnoses to be as much mainstreamed as possible. But that does cost money, and I think children, especially the children who stay until they're 22 in high school and then are the graduates. That wouldn't have happened a long time ago. Those children were essentially shut away from society. That's not happening anymore, and that's a good thing that it's not happening anymore.
It is a good thing, but it presents a whole different set of challenges.
It
because
does.
You know, I love that the ARC of Northern Virginia always the benefit breakfast is a life like yours.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's because everybody wants a life that's fulfilling. They want employment. They want to live independently. They want to be able to give. People want the same life.
Yes.
But we have to provide supports. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about, we talk about affordable housing, and yet we're not necessarily segmenting the kind of supportive housing certain kinds of populations need. So when we closed institutions and said we should not put people in shelters or even group homes, but they should live to the fullest extent to which they can independently, we didn't put funds,
No.
urban planning, nothing. And so it's kind of like we have aspirations, but it's very hard to see how we're making progress.
And the other part about that, which is really disheartening, is when we did close state hospitals and so forth and did do community living and in some cases group homes, some neighbors did not like that and were absolutely railed against the group homes for people with disabilities. It wasn't the people who were recuperating from addiction and so forth. These were people who just didn't have the ability to do a lot of things because of whatever birth issues or perhaps an injury. And I was always so disheartened to try to explain to people that these are folks who are living in your community. These are your neighbors. These are the children of your neighbors. You know, get over it. And I have visited a number of those facilities, and the staff is so loving, and the people who live there are thriving. Their parents are terrified about what will happen after their parents are not there anymore because they're losing their support groups. So that's a challenge for us too as a society.
I know that it is. And one of the things I want to talk about after this break is how we fund support systems like nonprofits and community partners to deliver the things that government can't always provide. So please join us after this break. We're talking to Penny Gross.
Nice going, Spencer. I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
I'm so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
Dad.
See ya, dude. See ya. You got me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining. No,
Hi.
you cannot
Tell him it was an accident,
count on me
and we can fix the window.
for sure.
Come on,
Oh, the
I'll come with you.
friends are
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rigged out fight. Nothing very nice. Holy spice. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and we are talking to the Honorable Penny Gross, who recently retired after 28 years representing the Mason District on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. So Penny, we were talking about housing and supportive housing and people with disabilities, and there are many ways in which local government supports people who have many different kinds of needs. But sometimes that is direct services through the government, and sometimes it is in partnership with nonprofits or agencies where, you know, grants are given so that direct services can be provided. There's like 1.2 million people in Fairfax County. In order to reach people who need, whether it's food insecurity or it's mental health services, talk a little bit about how the government has to look at funding the people who provide direct services.
I've always said that we couldn't do what we do in Fairfax County without our nonprofit organizations. Some of them are faith-based, some of them are not. But we have so many wonderful nonprofits that raise funds separately. They raise money in the community so that they can provide some of the services that are restricted by local governments. You know, we can't always use all of our federal money, especially, to help people who may not be here with proper documentation. Right. So our nonprofits help many ways to deal with the kinds of things that we cannot provide. But years ago, this was actually before I joined the board, so this probably goes back 35 years or so, we have a community funding pool in Fairfax County. The board allocates a certain amount of money, usually a few $1 million, that nonprofit organizations can apply for. And they always have to, the grant process is pretty difficult to go through. Comprehensive, let's put it.
Comprehensive is a very good word. Comprehensive.
And I've read some of those applications. And sometimes they're carved out very narrowly to help a certain population, and sometimes they're much broader. They'll be for housing, they'll be for mental health services, they'll be for language services. And then there's a separate independent group that decides who gets the grants and how much those grants will be. Rarely is it everything that everybody asks for. The number of applications usually, or at least the dollar figure for applications usually is about twice as much as what we have money for. And there are some who get grants every year because their programs are really, really good. There are others that may get a grant for a year or two, and there are some that we've taken off the list in the past because they didn't really fulfill what we had hoped they would do. But it's a way of augmenting the county tax dollars, the county revenue. And of course the county applies for federal grants too.
Like block grants.
Yes, and right now with the political atmosphere that we have, I am very, very concerned about the grant opportunities through the federal government at all levels, whether it's housing or mental health or restoration of the Chesapeake Bay. I'm really concerned about the funding supports that may disappear as a result of the administration's battle axe or broad axe that they've taken to everything in government.
And that brings us, because everybody's in their budget season right now.
Yes.
So why don't you give us a little bit of a flavor about what that budget process looks like? Because Fairfax County has an enormous budget, enormous, and there's so many people. You actually devote like a whole day to people coming for the public, the community coming for 3 days. 3 days for the public coming forward to say, this is what I think you should fund, and making a case for that. Much bigger than other localities, Fairfax County, but the budget process itself is huge. But how do you approach it? How do you eat that elephant?
Yeah. Well, I can assure you, as I have had to explain to constituents all the time, our budget process does not start in February when the county executive presents his budget. It actually is a year-round process at this point, but normally the budget for the next fiscal year. The staff starts putting that together in September, October of the previous year. And then it is the most important thing, I think, that the board does is determining the tax rate and and how revenues are going to be spent. The board is extremely aware of where our revenue comes from. It comes from the taxpayer, the real estate taxpayer. And people think, oh, well, you get all this money from the federal government and from the states. I think the federal government part of it is maybe 3%, and the state is a little bit more. Everything else we have to figure out ourselves. And so we are not as diversified in our tax abilities as we would like to be. I've always said, you know, apparently if real estate tax was good enough for Mr. Jefferson, it's good enough for us now, 250 years later, which it isn't, which is why we're constantly looking for other sources of revenue. Sometimes, and I watched it grow over time, because Fairfax County is so large, but we have Fairfax City, the towns of Herndon and Vienna and Clifton, there's been a greater opportunity for some partnerships with those other jurisdictions so that we can get bigger things done, and things that, you know, might cross borders. We're very aware of our borders. Most of our constituents don't really know where one district starts and where another one ends, or even where one county starts and one. I mean, you see the signs as you're driving down the highway.
But people don't really know.
You can go through probably 6 different jurisdictions in a daily shopping area. You know, if you're going.
Think about driving down Route 50 from Washington D.C. to Middleburg.
Yes, exactly.
That's a lot of jurisdictions along Route 50.
Exactly right. And so we all pretty much have the same challenges. It's just a matter of scale. So as we're looking at what we can fund, there's always something that has to come off the budget. I can only think of, I think, one time that it was just prior to the Great Recession. Everything just seemed to be going so well. We were able to cut the tax rate down to like 87 cents and get rid of some things that people didn't want to have to pay for anymore. And oh my goodness, wasn't this great? And then wham, we had the Great Recession and all bets were off. So I've always, when you have a difficult budget year, you'd love to go back to some sort of land use. You know, land use looks really good. But when you have a difficult land use case, you think, well, maybe budget looks pretty good. I think that, though, the challenge for us is to get to let our constituents know actually paying your taxes is, what does Jerry Conley like to say, the dues we pay for living in a civilized society. I don't know that it was original. I don't know it was original to Jerry,
but I've heard it numerous times. Yes.
But you know, there is a social compact. Society was built years ago, centuries ago, on a social compact. We're all in this together. I may pay for your kids to go to school. I mean, you know, really. And maybe you had a fire, and so my taxes paid for the fire department to come to your house. I mean, that's dumbing it down a bit. But if we could just appreciate that we all are living in the community, and there's something in the budget for each one of us. There's also something probably in the budget that each one of us doesn't particularly like or would like to have expanded. One of the best cases for a budget was several years ago, it's probably been 15 now, where there was for disabled folks, there was going to be some severe cuts. Well, that community got together, and boy, did we hear from them. We were able to restore some of the proposed cuts because there was such great advocacy. And that's where I think people need to recognize they can be advocates for something, not advocates against something, but advocates for something. If something is really important to you, come and tell the board about it. Don't say, oh, you can take this away because I want that. No, advocate for something rather than against something. We've heard some wonderful stories during budget hearings. We've also heard the same old things sometimes, and I've always wanted to say, tell us something we don't already know.
You know, that's what I concur 100%. You know, there's a lot of people who are like, well, I don't use any services, and I'm thinking, well, the police come if you call, and the fire department comes if you need them, and the public library, and the people who run sign and signals, you know, the people who clear the snow, and but people really do have this concept, well, I don't actually use any services, and it's just an illusion.
Yes, and there are times when I want to say, well, then why are you living here? You know, if you've got it pretty good. One of the things that people don't recognize, I think, for a lot of times, is something that the fire department does. There's an international insurance standard of some sort. I can't remember the exact name of it. But if you meet certain criteria, your individual homeowners insurance premiums can be reduced because you live in a community, in a jurisdiction that has excellent fire services. Yes. And it took a while for Fairfax County to get to that level. It has to do with how quickly you can respond to various things. But it's something the fire department is very proud of. It's something most people are not aware of. But that's one of those things. You're living in a community. You're supporting the county with your tax dollars, and these are the things you get back. It isn't handing you a check. It's giving you something that is almost incomprehensible. You wouldn't think about it, but it's there because you live in Fairfax County.
I know, and I want to talk more in our next segment as well about the staff that provides the services, what it takes to identify, recruit, develop, and retain the staff people.
Public service.
The public service. The public service people, because not everybody says, I want to be in municipal government when I grow up, right? I find this when I go to middle schools, for career day. Yeah. No one's saying, I want to be an urban planner, or I want to be in environmental sustainability. And so I think I would like to see career days have people from our local governments show up to show young people that there are great careers doing local government in their own community.
Absolutely.
So when we come back, we are going to continue to talk with the Honorable Penny Gross, who has 28 years of experience helping to figure out how to keep Fairfax County going. And since we're all in budget season, we are going to hear more about what we should be thinking about as far as priorities.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my God, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you,
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and we are speaking with the Honorable Penny Gross. She was on the Board of Supervisors for 28 years in Fairfax County, and we are talking about budget season and how we decide what things have value. So when we went to our break, we were talking about people and how people run governments. And the county has a huge staff, people doing so many things. Talk a little bit about how we should be thinking about the people who deliver services in government.
You know, I was chair of the board's personnel committee for the entire 28 years.
Oh, I did not know that. So
yes.
what happened?
Kate Hanley had asked me when I first got elected to chair the Human Services Committee. I knew it was a bad budget year, and I said, "Oh, Kate, I'm a brand new board member. I don't have the ability to do that right off the bat." And she said, "Well, okay, would you take personnel?" I said, "Sure." Not realizing, of course, that everything devolves upon personnel. So I learned my lesson. But we have about 12,000 employees in Fairfax County government. That's not including the schools. Schools has
their own separate staff.
Something like 22,000. So we have about 12,000 employees, including about 1,500 police officers and about the same amount of firefighters and EMTs and so forth. And those are the public safety side, including, and then we also have, of course, emergency management, which is also public safety, and our dispatch center. But for the most part, we have people who are providing services, sometimes absolutely on the ground, but often just from an office, making sure that everything runs, you know, the trains run on time, kind of thing. And so about 88% of our budget is personnel. And there are folks who think, oh, well, these people make too much money. And I'm thinking, no, they don't. In the private sector, they make a whole lot more. We try to provide benefits packages, you know, health insurance and retirement benefits and so forth that you can subscribe to. And those are all things that any employer would do, is supposed to be doing for their people. But for our public service personnel, and I have met very few county employees who didn't just love what they were doing. They feel that they are making a difference. They know the community. They are our neighbors and our friends in many cases. When I would be door knocking during campaigns, I would run across a lot of people in Mason District who actually worked for the county government who said, well, you don't know me, but I know you, kind of thing. And so you've got park authority members, you've got people who work in human services, you've got a pretty good contingent of people who work in the finance office, which is so important to keep our finances correct. A Department of Tax Administration, nobody likes to pay their taxes, but we've got wonderful staff who will work out any kind of problem you have with your taxes. If you paid them late, or you, whoops, I forgot, or whatever. We've got great folks who will do that. And they also, those same people in tax administration, many of them are the people who have to reassess your house, your property every year. So these are professional folks who have backgrounds, degrees to do the things they do. And I mustn't forget, one of my favorites is the folks who work on the water systems, the wastewater treatment plant and the Occoquan. You know, we don't ever think about the fact that when we turn on the faucet, we get clean water.
I know, right? We just take it for granted.
Water is great, and when we pull that, you know, we want it to run, we flush the toilet, we want it to run away, and we want it to be, but we want it to be handled properly. We win awards for our great public service personnel who keep us on the straight and narrow all the time. Budgets really do display the values of the community. And that's something to always keep in mind. What kind of a community do we want? What kind of community are we willing to pay for? And I think often it's not just pay forward for it, but pay it forward. Because what we do to establish a good government and a good structure now will benefit us in the long run. We've built it on sort of the shoulders of people who came before.
You know, when you think about parks, for instance, let's just talk about parks. You know, and people take for granted that parks are there. They don't understand what it takes to build them, maintain them, keep them clean, keep them safe, and to develop or redevelop them so that they are usable space for all kinds of folks, including making them ADA compliant. But there's a lot of parks in Fairfax County, and we know what has happened at the federal level with cutting national park staff. And when you see what's happening at the national level and the message that it sends about things and people that are and are not valuable, speak to the commitment the county has made to the parks.
And that is one thing I know in this year's budget, there are cuts proposed. And some of the cuts are the park authorities. And my park authority people tell me, well, you know, we only get less than 1% of the budget, and we're taking 2% of the cuts, you know. And I'm thinking, actually, there are some cuts in the park budget. I'm planning to go to the budget hearings and advocate for no cuts in certain programs, especially my wonderful concert series, because these are things that people really enjoy. But our parks are being loved to death. They really are. I think during COVID, people really discovered our parks, and now they're still really appreciating them. But our parks are older. Trees only have a certain finite life. We're losing trees in our parks. We need to replant. These are all things that the park authority staff does. It's, you know, we have some wonderful rec centers, but it's the open space that really is treasured. And now, of course, as I mentioned in the previous segment, we have such a diversity of population. We're finding a diversity of demands for certain kinds of recreational opportunity.
Cricket fields.
Who would have thought?
Lots of people play cricket.
Exactly. But this is something years ago we never even thought about. So trying to accommodate all users with all sorts of opportunities is a challenge. And in some cases, you know, we can't do it all. But that's where the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority comes in. And also how lovely that most of our parks in Northern Virginia that are in other jurisdictions are free. Free to the public. So you can go to Bonaire Rose Garden in Arlington, or you can go to Occoquan, or you can go to Algonquian in Loudoun County, and you can enjoy, you know, just the ability to recreate and just restore your soul in a park.
I will talk too, because I was talking to somebody over the weekend, because it's Women's History Month.
Yes.
About the memorial on the grounds of the Capitol, Voices in the Garden, Voices from the Garden, that are the full-size statues of women. Yeah, well, that one is in Richmond. But then I was talking about, because people, when I took some folks down for VML Lobby Day, they had never been to the one. People don't even know it's there on the Richmond Capitol grounds, right?
Yes.
But then I said, people don't go to the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial at Occoquan. So every time visitors come in, Tom and I always take them down, but there are local people who don't know it's there. And the county really was such a great partner to that nonprofit who worked for so long to build a memorial to the suffragists. So that's just one example of how the county invested in something that makes a difference, memorializing the women, especially the suffragists who were, you know, held at the Occoquan workhouse right next door.
This is part of our Fairfax County history. It's not a beautiful part of our history, but it is a really significant part of our history. And we, you know, living here in Northern Virginia and in Fairfax County in particular, we have so much history that other places don't have. we don't necessarily appreciate it sometimes. Yes, we have Mount Vernon, but we also have Gunston Hall. We have all these other locations. We have the workhouse, the suffragette memorial. There is, you can see how this country was founded just by looking around Fairfax County a little bit. The courthouse in Fairfax City. Terribly historic.
And it's being renovated, which again brings us full circle to what are you willing to commit? What are you willing to fund? Because if a budget is about your values, you have to fund your values.
Yes, you do. And sometimes that means you keep those projects on the list, but you don't fund them that particular year. So you have a goal in mind so that we can do this, this, and this. But this, and this is going to have to wait for a future budget. And folks need to understand, yes, we've heard you. We don't have the ability to fund it right now. It's like anything in your household budget. Oh, golly, I'd really like to do, I'd like to have a new sofa. Can't afford the new sofa right now. We're going to have to put that on a longer term kind of basis. So it's the same thing. There are some things that are not going to get funded, and you just have to say, no, that's not something that we are going to do. But the things we want to do, have it on that list, have it in a priority. It could be level 1, level 2, level 3. Sometimes it has to be done in phases, but ultimately it will get done. That's the suffragist monument is a great one, because I remember when it was being designed by Bob. I'm trying to remember.
Beach.
Yes, Bob Beach. I think he lived in City of Falls Church. I really was appreciated his ability to take something that was so ephemeral and really bring it down to something that you could really enjoy and really understand. So that's all a very local piece. It was designed by a local architect. It was put together by a local group. I wrote many checks to that group because I thought it was important.
Me too.
And that's another piece, I think, that if you think it's important, you need to support the nonprofits that are working on things to get things accomplished, whether it's a suffragist memorial, or it's a mental health program, or it's housing for
people who need
support.
And you're right. I mean, it's on all of us. These are public-private partnerships and individual donors who make the quality of life here in Northern Virginia what it is.
Exactly.
So when we return, we are talking with Penny Gross. And in our final segment, we are going to talk to her about some of her favorite projects, which include, I can tell you, the Chesapeake Bay, along with some other things that she's going to talk about, like military families here in our area. So please join us after this break.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
I was afraid of that.
Well, guess it's time to get you fixed.
Your pets will start fooling around sooner than you think.
Go on, get out of here!
Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
Food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy! And refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodssafety.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and we are talking to the Honorable Penny Gross. And here in our final segment, we are going to talk about some of the favorite things that you have worked on in your 28 years in local government here in Fairfax County.
Thank you. Well, you know, when I look back on all the things we've done, I mean, wow.
It's a lot, right?
And it's extremely varied. You know, in 1998, I was asked by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments to investigate whether we needed a Chesapeake Bay Policy Committee. Chesapeake 2000, known as C2K, was being drafted. And so, you know, is this going to be important enough for the region? Well, I determined, yes, it was, and I ended up chairing the policy committee, and I served on it for the entire time from 98 to 2023. But I also got appointed by Governor Mark Warner to the Local Government Advisory Committee to the Chesapeake Executive Council, which gives me another opportunity, you know, for Chesapeake Bay restoration. The Bay, many people will never see the Bay, even though they live in the Bay watershed, because it's 64,000 square miles. But what we are doing to get local governments involved, our whole idea with C2K was to get local governments mentioned in C2K because they had not been mentioned before. So we were very successful, 120 different mentions of local governments. So now we were on the hook. We knew we had to take some responsibility. And over the years, we have seen wastewater treatment plants become so much more efficient, reducing the amount of pollutants. Submerged vegetation has been restored to a great extent. The crabs are coming back. Oysters are coming back. This is because local governments, in partnership with state and feds, are working together to reduce pollution to the Bay and improve the water quality in the Bay, which then promotes and improves the ability for all the critters to grow in the Bay. The Bay is a tremendous economic resource for the region. And so I'm very pleased to still be involved in that. In fact, I'm going to the Eastern Shore on Wednesday for an LGAC meeting on site. We'll be right on the Choptank River. And you learn so much about what other jurisdictions are dealing with when you get involved in a statewide or regional organization like that. It's one of the things I'm very proud of. And then I chaired at the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, I chaired the Community and Military Partnership for about 7 years. Well, when I retired from the Board of Supervisors, in the spring of the first year I had retired, the board decided to form a Veterans and Military Families Commission. And I thought, why didn't you do that while I was still on the board? But I thought, well, if they're looking for people to serve, I'm going to put my hand up. So I applied to be appointed to the new commission. When I got that appointment, I thought, I got to be chair. So I put my name in for chairman because I figured building a commission from the ground up was, you know, somebody needed to know with the county stuff. And so we've been in existence for about 9 months now, working on gaps in county services for the military families and veterans. We want to keep veterans here when they muster out of the service. We want to keep their skills here in Northern Virginia and in Fairfax County, and that's going to be one of our main goals. That's what the Regional Commission was working on. That's what we're working on in Fairfax County.
And I think that's more of a gap than people think. We have a very high cost of living here,
yes.
Number one. I mean, we have a large retired military. I think it's like California, Texas, and Virginia.
Yes.
But when you think about what it costs to live here, especially when you are no longer in active duty, You've got to find employment, and this is just a very expensive region to live in. So I can imagine that there are gaps where you've got to get people over that transition.
That is one of the biggest things we talk about, because there's a base housing allowance that will cover some of the rent for private rentals, but it really doesn't go very far to actually purchase a house, especially if you're enlisted. If you're an officer, you're making a little more money, but if you're enlisted, it's really hard, and you may be in the service for a career, but you've never reached the kind of salary level. So we know that housing is very expensive here, and what happens to our veterans. So that's one of the things we're working on. I think we've got some great opportunities. There's also something that is much less, I wouldn't say important, but something that I have been enjoying for a very long time, because I helped start it before I ever got elected. Is our free summer concerts in the parks.
Yes.
We have Spotlight by Starlight at Mason District Park. We have 29 concerts a summer, and it's all free. You can bring the kids, you can bring your dinner, and we have a great venue with the Newton Edwards Amphitheater, and it's just a wonderful way. I like to say I spend my summer vacation 1 hour at a time, because you get exposed to all sorts of different kinds of music. I thought Zydeco, oh my goodness, I'm not interested in Zydeco.
But yeah,
I love Zydeco.
I know, we used to go to Jazz Fest, and you hear Zydeco down at Jazz Fest.
The free summer concerts, which now are in all the districts, are the best thing we do as community, because everybody's happy, everybody's having a good time. You come as you are. It's just, you don't have to drive all the way into the Kennedy Center or even to Birchmere. You can see live quality performances all summer long, all around the county. So I'm very proud of that. But there's one other thing that I'd like to chat about a little bit, and that's the opportunities that I've had to put my voice out there and keep my voice out there now. In 1997, Nick Benton of the Falls Church News Press asked me to write a newspaper column, a weekly column. And I thought, oh, golly. I consulted a couple people who were columnists that I knew, and they said, well, yes, you should do it, but you need to have somebody else write it. You're going to be way too busy. I thought, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to write every word myself. And for it's been about 28 years, I've been writing a weekly column. I have to have 500 words, at least 500 words into Nick Benton by 5 o'clock on Mondays. And I was originally writing about things in the county. Nick asked me to continue my column after I retired, and I was really quite surprised. And I said, well, Nick, I won't be able to be as intimately involved with the county because I won't have access to all that. So can I write about anything I want? He said, yes, you can write about anything you want. Well, there's a lot to write about these days. And I'm so pleased that Nick gave me the opportunity to continue my voice. Writing for the Falls Church News Press about national and international situations, about leadership or lack of leadership, about what we should be doing, about how to approach what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. My 60 years of experience in elective politics is really providing me a great background to give others the benefit of what I've learned. And I hope that it is one of the things that I am remembered for, because I, quite frankly, enjoy it, even though, blank screen, what am I going to write about this week? It doesn't take long to figure out something to write about.
I think local media is so important because we don't have local newspapers. I think it's one of the challenges because the Falls Church News Press has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
In Fairfax City, we don't have a local newspaper. I have a subscription to the Loudoun Times-Mirror, have a subscription to the Roanoke Times, and to the Richmond Times-Dispatch. And those local papers write about local issues. But the Washington Post is not writing about Fairfax City. And so these local newspapers make a difference in what communities know about what their government is doing. And not having one is a great challenge, I think.
It's a great disappointment because newspapers, the press overall, but newspapers have been such a good way of expanding on a story. You know, you get a little blip of a news item on the television, and you're never quite sure whether you can trust the journalism of it now. But a trusted newspaper, they can go into much greater detail. And so the death of the American newspaper is really very concerning to me. So I'm glad that Nick is still doing it. I know,
Nick is still doing it. Bless his heart. So one final thing, we've only got a few minutes left. Tell us about the Justice League. You caped Crusaders at the Justice League. Come on, that's something else you're doing in your retirement.
It's sort of funny. It's a small group, about 8 of us, that used to be on the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. We've all now moved on, retired, and Bob Lazaro, who's the executive director, whom you know, decided he didn't want to let go of all that experience.
All that institutional knowledge.
And so he has formed this, what we call the Justice League, and we get together for lunch every 2 or 3 months. Some of the discussion is about, you know, what people are, where they went on vacation and so forth, but it's quite often about what's going on now in the various jurisdictions. We have former mayors, former members of the board. When I was asked to join, I said, do I have to wear a cape? And no, we don't. But it's a good way to keep abreast of sort of post-election kinds of life, but also to provide introspection to Bob for the Regional Commission about what we see as the important things today. So it's fun. It's as I've often said, you know, in groups like this, you don't take minutes, you don't create legislation, you don't take votes. It's just an opportunity to continue being part of the public service element.
Well, Bob Lazaro does a great job. You and I are very fond of him, but NVRC is hitting it out of the park in meeting the moment and how they're bringing local jurisdictions and mayors and chairs together to really think about what we are going to do as a region. And one of the greatest things about being in Northern Virginia is the relationships between jurisdictions. We're all interconnected, we all depend on each other, and it's important. It's important to realize the importance of being a region.
And that's why it's so important for elected officials to accept those appointments to various boards, authorities, and commissions in the region, to COG, and go, attend. It's not an honorary position. You learn so much from your colleagues, and you learn what is bothering them. What is the issue in their particular community? You know, it's a wonderful opportunity for elected officials to broaden their abilities.
Well, and I agree with you, and you and I have served on, and I showed up, as you know.
Yes, you did.
But I showed up to learn, and I've learned a lot from you, honestly. Thank you so much, Penny.
My
This
pleasure.
it's been a pleasure for me, but I always learn something new when I talk to you.
Thank you.
This has been Inside Scoop here on St. Patrick's Day in Fairfax County. Join us next week here on Inside Scoop at 8 p.m.